General Marcus Thompson had seen everything during his 32 years of military service. He had commanded troops through desert storms, mountainous terrain, and urban warfare zones across 4 different continents. He had witnessed acts of extraordinary courage and devastating loss. He had shaken hands with presidents, negotiated with foreign officials, and made split-second decisions that affected thousands of lives. But nothing in his extensive military career had prepared him for what he would see on a quiet Tuesday morning in the Fort Braxton mess hall. The day started like any other for the 54-year-old general. His alarm clock buzzed at exactly 5:30 in the morning, just as it had every day for the past 3 decades. Marcus swung his legs over the side of his narrow military cot and planted his feet firmly on the cold concrete floor of his quarters. The routine was sacred to him. 20 minutes of calisthenics, a quick shower with regulation soap, and a breakfast that never varied from black coffee, 2 pieces of wheat toast, and a single scrambled egg. Marcus had always been a creature of habit. His fellow officers often joked that you could set your watch by the general's daily schedule. He believed that discipline in small things led to discipline in large things, and his unwavering personal routine had served him well throughout his career. This morning routine had carried him through deployments in Afghanistan, peacekeeping missions in Eastern Europe, and training exercises across the American Southwest. As he dressed in his perfectly pressed uniform, Marcus caught his reflection in the small mirror above his sink. Gray had crept into his hair over the past few years, and lines around his eyes spoke of long nights spent reviewing intelligence reports and strategic plans. He had aged well for a man who carried the weight of command on his shoulders, but there were days when he felt every one of his 54 years. The walk to the mess hall took exactly 7 minutes from his quarters. Marcus knew this because he had timed it during his first week at Fort Braxton, just as he timed everything else in his life. The base was coming alive around him as he walked. Young soldiers jogged past in formation, their boots hitting the pavement in perfect rhythm. Maintenance crews were already at work on the vehicles that lined the motor pool. The flag snapped crisply in the morning breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a drill sergeant was putting a group of new recruits through their paces. Fort Braxton was Marcus's 3rd assignment as a general, and he had grown to appreciate its straightforward efficiency. The base housed approximately 8,000 soldiers, ranging from fresh-faced recruits just out of basic training to seasoned non-commissioned officers with 20 years of experience. It was a training facility primarily designed to prepare soldiers for deployment overseas. Marcus took pride in the fact that soldiers who trained at Fort Braxton had some of the lowest casualty rates in active combat zones. The mess hall was already bustling with activity when Marcus arrived. Soldiers sat in groups around circular tables, talking quietly over their breakfast trays. The kitchen staff moved with practiced efficiency behind the serving line, keeping the steam tables filled with eggs, bacon, pancakes, and fresh fruit. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, mixed with the sound of cutlery against plates and the low hum of conversation. Marcus had always made it a point to eat breakfast in the enlisted mess hall rather than the officers' dining room. He believed it was important for soldiers to see their commanding officer as approachable, not isolated in an ivory tower. Some of his fellow officers thought this was unnecessary, but Marcus had learned early in his career that leadership was about connection as much as it was about authority. He grabbed a tray and moved through the serving line, exchanging brief greetings with the kitchen staff. Sergeant Martinez, who had been working in a mess hall for 6 years, always made sure to give the general an extra portion of scrambled eggs. Private Johnson, barely 19 years old, stammered a nervous, "Good morning, sir," as he ladled oatmeal onto Marcus's tray. These small interactions mattered to Marcus. They reminded him that behind every rank and serial number was a real person with their own story. Marcus found his usual table near the back corner of the mess hall. It gave him a good view of the entire room, while allowing him to observe the natural dynamics of the soldiers under his command. He had learned more about morale and unit cohesion from these breakfast observations than from most formal reports that crossed his desk. This morning, The atmosphere in the mess hall seemed typical. Groups of soldiers clustered around tables, some studying training manuals while they ate, others engaged in animated discussions about weekend plans or upcoming exercises. A table of new recruits sat quietly, still intimidated by their new environment. Veteran soldiers moved with the easy confidence that came from experience, joking with friends they had served alongside for years. Marcus was halfway through his scrambled eggs when he noticed her. She was sitting 3 tables away, her back partially turned toward him. Even from behind, there was something familiar about the way she held her shoulders, the particular shade of her brown hair, and the way she gestured with her hands while talking to the soldier sitting across from her. The soldier she was talking to was clearly smitten. He leaned forward, hanging on her every word, occasionally laughing at something she said. Marcus found himself watching their interaction with growing curiosity. The young woman seemed completely at ease, confident in a way that suggested she was not a new recruit. She wore her uniform with the casual precision of someone who had been wearing it for a while. As Marcus continued to observe, the young woman stood up to bus her tray. For a brief moment, she turned in his direction, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The profile was unmistakable, even though it had been nearly 3 years since he had last seen in person. The same determined chin, the same expressive eyes, the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking about something. But it couldn't be her. His daughter Sarah was supposed to be finishing her senior year at Georgetown University, studying international relations with plans to attend law school. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on diplomatic relations in post-conflict regions. She was supposed to be preparing for the LSAT and applying to top-tier law schools. She was definitely not supposed to be wearing an Army uniform and eating breakfast in a military mess hall 800 miles from her campus. Marcus set down his fork and rubbed his eyes, convinced that exhaustion was causing him to see things that weren't there. He had been working long hours preparing for an upcoming inspection, and stress had a way of playing tricks on the mind. When he looked up again, the young woman was gone, having left through the far exit of the mess hall. For the rest of breakfast, Marcus found himself distracted and unable to concentrate on the morning briefing materials he usually reviewed while eating. The image of that familiar profile kept surfacing in his mind. He told himself he was being ridiculous. Sarah was in Washington, D.C., probably sitting in a lecture hall or studying in the library. The resemblance was just a coincidence, nothing more. But as he made his way back to his office, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. He prided himself on his attention to detail and his ability to read situations accurately. These skills had served him well in combat zones where a misread signal could mean the difference between life and death. And his instincts were telling him that what he had seen in the mess hall was not a case of mistaken identity. Marcus's office was located in the base's administrative building, a functional concrete structure that housed the command staff. His assistant, Major Patricia Williams, had already arranged his schedule for the day and placed a stack of reports on his desk. The morning would be filled with meetings about training schedules, equipment maintenance, and personnel reviews. It was the kind of routine administrative work that kept a military base running smoothly, but rarely made headlines. "Good morning, General," Major Williams said as he entered the outer office. "Colonel Henderson is here for your 9 o'clock meeting, and the logistics briefing has been moved to 10:15 to accommodate the supply convoy inspection." Marcus nodded absently, his mind still occupied with the image from the mess hall. He settled behind his desk and tried to focus on the personnel files that needed his review, but concentration proved elusive. After 20 minutes of staring at the same page without absorbing any information, he made a decision. "Major Williams," he called to his assistant, "I need you to pull up the base roster for me. I want to see all personnel assigned to Fort Braxton within the last 6 months. Is there something specific you're looking for, sir?" Major Williams asked. "Just a routine review," Marcus replied, not wanting to explain his real motivation. "I want to familiarize myself with our newer soldiers." The roster contained hundreds of names, ranks, and assignment details. Marcus scrolled through page after page of information, looking for anything that might confirm or dispel his suspicions. Most of the recent arrivals were straight out of basic training or transferring from other bases. Their backgrounds were typical: small-town kids looking for education opportunities, urban youth seeking structure and direction, career soldiers moving to new assignments. It was on page 14 that Marcus found what he was both hoping for and dreading. There, listed among the recent arrivals, was Private Sarah Thompson, assigned to the 442nd Support Battalion 6 weeks earlier. Date of birth, social security number, emergency contact information, all of it matched his daughter exactly. Marcus stared at the computer screen for a long moment, his mind reeling with questions and emotions. How had Sarah enlisted without him knowing? Why had she left Georgetown? Why hadn't she told him about her decision to join the Army? As her father and a general officer, he should have been informed of her enlistment. The fact that he hadn't been suggested that Sarah had gone to considerable effort to keep her military service secret from him. The rational part of Marcus's mind began working through the implications. Sarah was over 18 and legally an adult, capable of making her own decisions about military service. She had every right to enlist without his permission or knowledge. But, as her father, Marcus felt hurt and confused by her decision to keep such a significant life change hidden from him. He thought back to their last conversation, a brief phone call 3 months earlier. Sarah had sounded distant and distracted, mentioning something about taking a semester off from school to figure things out. Marcus had been concerned, but respected her need for independence. He had assumed she was taking time to travel, or perhaps working an internship somewhere. It had never occurred to him that she might have enlisted in the military. The more Marcus thought about it, the more questions arose. How had Sarah managed to enlist under her own name without triggering any flags in the system? Someone should have noticed that General Marcus Thompson had a daughter named Sarah Thompson enlisting as a private. Either there had been a significant oversight in the administrative process, or Sarah had specifically requested that her family connection be kept confidential. Marcus's relationship with his daughter had always been complicated by the demands of his military career. He had missed school plays, birthday parties, and graduation ceremonies due to deployments and training exercises. His ex-wife, Sarah's mother, had often accused him of putting the Army before his family. The divorce, finalized when Sarah was 16, had created additional strain in their relationship. Despite these challenges, Marcus had always believed that he and Sarah maintained a strong bond. She was intelligent, determined, and shared his sense of duty and service, though he had always assumed she would express these qualities through civilian careers like law or diplomacy. The possibility that she had chosen to follow in his footsteps by joining the military was both surprising and, if he was honest with himself, somewhat gratifying. But the secrecy troubled him deeply. Why hadn't Sarah felt comfortable discussing her decision with him? Did she think he would disapprove of her enlisting as a private rather than pursuing an officer commission? Was she trying to prove something by starting at the bottom and earning her way up through the ranks? Or was there something else, something more personal, driving her decision to serve? Marcus realized that he needed to see Sarah face to face, but he also knew that approaching her directly could create complications. As the base commanding officer, any interaction between him and a private would be noticed and potentially problematic. If Sarah had chosen to keep their relationship secret, there might be good reasons that he didn't yet understand. He decided to observe from a distance for a few days, gathering more information before deciding how to handle the situation. Marcus had learned through years of military service that rushing into complex situations without adequate intelligence gathering often led to unintended consequences. Over the next 2 days, Marcus found excuses to visit different areas of the base where he might encounter Sarah. He attended training exercises he would normally delegate to subordinates, visited maintenance facilities during routine inspections, and took longer routes between buildings that took him past areas where the 442nd Support Battalion worked. His efforts were rewarded on Thursday afternoon when he spotted Sarah working with a group of soldiers in the motor pool. She was underneath a Humvee, troubleshooting an engine problem, while other soldiers watched and asked questions. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that she was taking the lead in the repair work, explaining procedures to her fellow soldiers with confidence and competence. Watching Sarah work, Marcus felt a complex mix of pride and concern. She was clearly intelligent and capable, earning the respect of her peers through knowledge and hard work rather than trading on her family name or background. But seeing his daughter covered in motor oil, wearing work clothes instead of the business attire he had always associated with her future career, drove home the reality of how much her life had changed. That evening, Marcus sat in his quarters reviewing everything he had learned about Sarah's presence at Fort Braxton. She was assigned to a support role that utilized her analytical skills, working with vehicle maintenance and logistics coordination. Her performance reviews, which he had discreetly obtained, showed that she was an exemplary soldier who had quickly earned the respect of her superiors and peers. But there was still the question of why she had enlisted and why she had kept it secret. Marcus knew that he would eventually have to confront these questions directly, but he wanted to understand the full scope of the situation before making any moves that might damage their relationship further. The breakthrough came on Friday morning, once again in the mess hall. Marcus had resumed his usual breakfast routine, though he now found himself scanning the room more carefully each morning. He spotted Sarah sitting with the same group of soldiers he had seen her with earlier in the week. This time, however, her position at the table gave him a clearer view of her uniform. It was then that Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. On Sarah's left forearm, clearly visible when she reached for her coffee cup, was a tattoo. Not just any tattoo, but a design that Marcus recognized immediately because he had the exact same tattoo in the exact same location on his own arm. The tattoo was the unit insignia of the 75th Ranger Regiment, specifically the design used by Marcus's company during his deployment to Afghanistan 15 years earlier. It was not a standard military tattoo that could be found in any parlor near a military base. It was a custom design that had been created by the soldiers of Charlie Company to commemorate their deployment and the brothers they had lost in combat. Only 12 soldiers had ever received that exact tattoo, and Marcus knew the name and face of every single one of them. The design included specific details that were meaningful only to the men who had served together during that deployment. The coordinates of a firefight where they had lost 2 soldiers, the call sign of their commanding officer, and a small symbol representing a local Afghan child they had helped reunite with his family. Marcus stared at the tattoo on Sarah's arm, his mind racing to understand how she could possibly have obtained it. The tattoo parlor where they had all gotten their ink had been in a small Afghan town near their base. The artist who created it had been killed in a bombing 6 months after they left. There was no way Sarah could have gotten that exact tattoo from the original source. As Marcus continued to stare, Sarah apparently sensed his gaze and looked up across the mess hall. For a moment, their eyes met directly. Sarah's expression shifted from casual conversation with her table mates to something much more complex: recognition, surprise, and what looked like resignation. She knew that he had seen her, and, more importantly, she knew that he had seen the tattoo. Sarah excused herself from her table and walked directly toward Marcus. Her stride was confident and purposeful, the walk of a soldier who had made a decision and was prepared to face the consequences. Other soldiers in the mess hall began to notice the unusual sight of a private walking directly toward the base commanding general. "Permission to speak privately, sir," Sarah said when she reached Marcus's table. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders and the way she held her hands clasped behind her back. Marcus nodded and stood up, aware that every eye in the mess hall was now focused on them. He led Sarah toward a small conference room adjacent to the mess hall, a space typically used for informal meetings between officers and enlisted personnel. Once they were alone behind closed doors, the formal military atmosphere evaporated. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in 3 years. She had grown into a confident young woman, but there was something different about her expression, something harder and more determined than he remembered. "Hello, Dad," Sarah said quietly. "Hello, Sarah," Marcus replied. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Sarah rolled up her sleeve, fully exposing the tattoo that had stopped Marcus cold just moments earlier. "I suppose you're wondering about this," she said. Marcus examined the tattoo more closely. Every detail was perfect, from the coordinates to the unit motto to the small personal symbols that each member of Charlie Company had added to make their tattoo unique. But what struck him most was not the accuracy of the design, but the fact that Sarah had chosen to get it at all. "Ow," was all Marcus could manage to say. Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. He was one of your guys, wasn't he? Charlie Company, Afghanistan, 2010. Marcus nodded. Rodriguez had been one of his best soldiers, a career NCO who had served with distinction for 18 years before retiring. "How do you know Rodriguez?" "He's my supervisor in the motor pool," Sarah said. "When I first arrived at Fort Braxton, I didn't know anyone. Rodriguez took me under his wing, helped me adjust to military life. We got to talking one day, and I mentioned that my father was career Army. When I told him your name, Rodriguez went completely silent." Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "He told me about Afghanistan, about Charlie Company, about the deployment where you saved his life during that firefight outside Kandahar. He showed me his tattoo and told me what it meant, not just the unit insignia, but the brotherhood, the sacrifice, the commitment to never leaving anyone behind." Marcus remembered the firefight Sarah was referring to. It had been a routine patrol that turned into an 8-hour battle when they were ambushed by Taliban fighters. Rodriguez had been pinned down by sniper fire, wounded and unable to move. Marcus had crossed 40 yards of open ground under enemy fire to reach Rodriguez and pull him to safety. It was the kind of thing that soldiers did for each other, but Rodriguez had never forgotten it. "Rodriguez told me that you never talked about what you did over there, never talked about the men you served with or the things you'd seen. He said you came home and threw yourself into your career, climbing the ranks, but never acknowledging the cost of your service." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. He had always believed that dwelling on past deployments was counterproductive, that focusing on the future was more important than reliving difficult memories. "When I decided to enlist," Sarah continued, "Rodriguez offered to give me the tattoo. He said it would connect me to your history, to the part of your life that you never shared with me. I know I had no right to wear it, no right to claim connection to something I never experienced. But I wanted to understand who you really are, not just the general who missed my soccer games and school plays, but the soldier who risked his life for his men." Marcus sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs, overwhelmed by the revelation. Sarah's decision to enlist, her choice to keep it secret, and now the tattoo. It was all connected to her desire to understand him better, to bridge the gap that his military career had created between them. "You could have just asked me," Marcus said finally. Sarah shook her head. "When? Between deployments? Between training exercises? During the 5-minute phone calls every few weeks? Dad, you've been running away from anything personal for as long as I can remember. After Mom left, after the divorce, you disappeared even more completely into your career." The words stung because they contained more truth than Marcus wanted to admit. He had used his military responsibilities as a shield against the messiness of personal relationships and family obligations. It had been easier to focus on clear-cut military objectives than to deal with the complex emotions of failed marriage and distant fatherhood. "So you enlisted to get my attention?" Marcus asked. "No," Sarah replied firmly. "I enlisted because I wanted to understand what drives you, what makes you willing to sacrifice everything else for the Army. I wanted to know if I had inherited that same sense of duty, that same calling to serve something bigger than myself." Sarah rolled down her sleeve, covering the tattoo that had started this conversation. "I've been here for 6 weeks, Dad. 6 weeks of getting up at dawn, following orders, learning to work as part of a team. 6 weeks of understanding what it means to be a soldier. And I finally get it. why you chose this life, why you stayed even when it cost you your marriage and your relationship with me. Marcus looked at his daughter with new eyes. The young woman sitting across from him was not the college student he remembered, focused on academic achievements and career plans. This was someone who had made a conscious choice to test herself against the same challenges that had shaped his own life. The conference room fell silent as both father and daughter absorbed the weight of what had been revealed. Outside, the normal sounds of base life continued. Vehicles moving, soldiers training, the routine business of military service. But inside this small room, two people were confronting years of misunderstood motivations and misconnections. Marcus realized that this conversation was just the beginning. There were still questions to be answered, relationship dynamics to navigate, and practical considerations to address. Sarah's presence at Fort Braxton under his command created potential complications that would need to be handled carefully. But for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was seeing his daughter clearly, understanding the woman she had become and the motivations that drove her decisions. The tattoo that had stopped him cold in the mess hall was more than just ink on skin. It was Sarah's way of claiming connection to the part of his life that had always remained hidden, her attempt to understand the man behind the uniform. And perhaps, Marcus thought, it was also an opportunity for him to finally bridge the gap that his own choices had created between them. The conversation in the conference room had lasted 45 minutes, but for Marcus, it felt like both an instant and a lifetime. When Sarah finally stood to return to her duties, she paused at the door and delivered words that would echo in Marcus's mind for days to come. "Dad, I'm not asking you to treat me differently because I'm your daughter. I'm asking you to see me as the soldier I'm trying to become. Everything else we can figure out later." The door closed behind her, leaving Marcus alone with thoughts that tumbled over each other in rapid succession. His daughter was serving under his command, had been for 6 weeks, and he had been completely unaware. The implications of this situation extended far beyond personal family dynamics. As base commanding officer, Marcus had responsibilities to maintain proper military order and avoid any appearance of favoritism or special treatment. Marcus returned to his office to find Major Williams waiting with the afternoon schedule, but concentration proved impossible. He found himself staring out the window, watching soldiers move across the base courtyard, wondering if one of them might be Sarah. The morning's revelation had shifted something fundamental in his understanding of both his daughter and himself. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. The name triggered a flood of memories that Marcus had spent years suppressing. Afghanistan, 2010. Charlie Company had been deployed to a remote outpost near Kandahar, tasked with training Afghan National Army units and conducting security patrols. It had been Marcus's second deployment as a company commander, and Rodriguez had been one of his most reliable non-commissioned officers. Marcus could still remember the day Rodriguez had been wounded with crystalline clarity. They had been returning from a routine patrol when insurgents attacked their convoy with small arms fire and rocket-propelled grenades. The ambush had been carefully planned, designed to channel the American soldiers into a kill zone where they could be picked off systematically. Rodriguez had been thrown from his vehicle when an RPG struck the engine block. He had landed hard against a concrete barrier, his left leg clearly broken, unable to move under his own power. The insurgent fire was concentrated and accurate, making any rescue attempt extremely dangerous. Protocol would have been a call for air support and wait for backup before attempting to recover the wounded soldier. But Marcus had made a different choice. He had left the relative safety of his position and sprinted across open ground to reach Rodriguez. The 40 yards had felt like 40 miles, with bullets striking the ground around him and the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds filling the air. He had reached Rodriguez, thrown the wounded sergeant over his shoulder, and made the return trip to safety while his soldiers provided covering fire. Rodriguez had survived with a permanent limp and commendations for valor, but he had never forgotten who had risked his life to pull him out of that kill zone. Neither had the other soldiers of Charlie Company. That shared experience of combat, of life and death decisions made in split seconds, had forged bonds that civilian life could never replicate. Marcus had rarely spoken about that deployment, even to his ex-wife. The intensity of combat operations, the weight of command decisions that affected soldiers' lives, and the brotherhood forged under fire were experiences that seemed impossible to explain to anyone who hadn't lived them. It was easier to focus on the administrative aspects of military service, the career progression, and professional achievements that could be understood by outsiders. But, apparently, Rodriguez had shared these stories with Sarah. The thought that his former soldier had provided his daughter with insights into his character that he himself had never offered created a complex mix of gratitude and regret. Rodriguez had given Sarah something that Marcus had failed to provide: an understanding of the man behind the uniform, the person shaped by experiences that went far beyond rank and responsibility. Over the next several days, Marcus found himself paying closer attention to the soldiers at Fort Braxton, particularly those in the 442nd Support Battalion, where Sarah was assigned. He attended training exercises with new interest, observing not just the technical proficiency of the soldiers, but their interactions, their camaraderie, and the subtle dynamics that made some units more effective than others. During one of these observations, Marcus spotted Sarah working with a team that was conducting vehicle maintenance training. She was leading a group of newer soldiers through the process of diagnosing transmission problems, explaining complex mechanical concepts in simple, clear language. Her approach reminded Marcus of the best non-commissioned officers he had known, patient with new soldiers, demanding of high standards, and focused on building competence through understanding rather than rote memorization. What struck Marcus most was how naturally Sarah seemed to fit into the military environment. She moved with the confidence of someone who had found her place, who understood her role, and embraced the responsibilities that came with it. This was not the uncertain college student he remembered from their last meeting, but a young woman who had discovered something important about herself through military service. Marcus also began to notice how other soldiers responded to Sarah. In the mess hall, junior soldiers sought her out for advice and conversation. During training exercises, more experienced soldiers treated her as an equal rather than a burden to be managed. She had clearly earned respect through competence and character rather than demanding it through rank or family connections. The more Marcus observed, the more complex his feelings became. Pride in Sarah's obvious success as a soldier mixed with regret that he had missed witnessing her transformation. Concern about the potential complications of having his daughter serve under his command battled with curiosity about her motivations and future plans. Most challenging of all was the growing realization that Sarah might understand military service in ways that he had forgotten or never fully appreciated. Marcus decided to seek guidance from Colonel Henderson, his deputy commander, and a soldier he trusted implicitly. Henderson had served for 28 years, had commanded units in multiple combat zones, and was known for his practical wisdom about military leadership challenges. If anyone could provide perspective on the situation with Sarah, it would be Henderson. They met in Marcus's office on a Tuesday afternoon, ostensibly to discuss upcoming training schedules, but with the real agenda being Marcus's need for confidential counsel. "Jim," Marcus began after closing the door and ensuring they would not be interrupted, "I need to discuss a sensitive personnel matter with you. What I'm about to tell you stays between us." Henderson nodded, his expression serious. "Of course, sir. What's the situation?" "I have a family member serving at Fort Braxton. A close family member whose presence here creates potential command complications." Henderson raised an eyebrow, but remained silent, waiting for Marcus to continue. "My daughter enlisted 6 weeks ago and is assigned to the 442nd Support Battalion. I only discovered this yesterday." For a moment, Henderson was speechless. Then, he asked the obvious question, "How did you not know your daughter had enlisted?" Marcus explained the complicated dynamics of his relationship with Sarah, the impact of his divorce on their communication, and his assumption that she was still in college. He described discovering her presence through the mess hall encounter and the subsequent conversation that had revealed her motivations for joining the military. Henderson listened without interruption, occasionally nodding as Marcus described the various elements of the situation. When Marcus finished, Henderson sat quietly for several minutes, clearly thinking through the implications. First question, Henderson finally said. Is Private Thompson a good soldier? For what I can observe, yes. Her performance reviews are excellent, and she's clearly respected by her peers and supervisors. Second question, do you believe she enlisted for legitimate reasons, or is this some kind of attention-seeking behavior? Marcus thought about his conversation with Sarah in the conference room. I believe her motivations are genuine. She wanted to understand military service and test herself against the same challenges I faced. Third question, are you prepared to treat her exactly like any other soldier under your command, without favoritism or special consideration? This was the hardest question, the one that got to the heart of Marcus's dilemma. As a father, his instinct was to protect Sarah from the dangers and hardships of military life. As a general, he knew that any appearance of favoritism would undermine his authority and potentially damage Sarah's standing with her fellow soldiers. I want to be fair to her and to the other soldiers, Marcus said, but I'm not sure I can completely separate my role as her father from my duties as base commander. Henderson nodded thoughtfully. Sir, I've seen situations like this before, though not usually with such a close family relationship. The key is transparency and consistency. If you try to hide the connection, it will eventually come out and create more problems than addressing it directly. What do you recommend? I think you need to make the relationship known to the immediate chain of command, Sarah's company commander, first sergeant, and battalion commander. Not the entire base, but the people who need to know to ensure proper handling of any situations that might arise. Henderson paused, then continued. You also need to establish clear boundaries with Private Thompson. No private meetings unless there are witnesses present. No special assignments or considerations. Complete transparency in any interactions you have with her unit. And personally, Marcus asked, that's more complicated. You're going to have to figure out how to be her father and her commanding officer without compromising either role. It won't be easy, but it's not impossible if you're both committed to making it work. The conversation with Henderson provided Marcus with a framework for handling the professional aspects of Sarah's presence at Fort Braxton, but the personal dimensions remained challenging. That evening, Marcus sat in his quarters reviewing everything he knew about his daughter's military service, trying to understand not just what she had done, but why she had chosen this particular path. Sarah's academic record at Georgetown had been outstanding. She had been on track for law school admission, with LSAT scores and grades that would have opened doors at the most prestigious institutions. Her undergraduate thesis on diplomatic relations had received recognition from the international relations faculty. By any conventional measure, she had been preparing for a successful civilian career that would have provided financial security and professional prestige. Yet she had walked away from all of that to enlist as a private in the Army. The decision represented a fundamental shift in her life trajectory, one that suggested she valued something other than traditional markers of success. The more Marcus thought about it, the more he realized that Sarah's choice reflected values that he had tried to instill in her. Service before self, commitment to something larger than personal ambition, and the willingness to earn respect through performance rather than credentials. Marcus realized that he needed to have another conversation with Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. As the soldier who had been closest to these events, Rodriguez might provide insights into Sarah's motivations and her adjustment to military life that Marcus couldn't obtain through official channels. The next day, Marcus arranged to visit the motor pool during routine maintenance operations. Rodriguez was supervising a team of soldiers working on a convoy of vehicles that would be heading out for training exercises later in the week. Marcus approached casually, as if the visit were part of his normal inspection routine. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Marcus said, how are the preparations coming along? Rodriguez snapped to attention. Very well, sir. All vehicles should be mission ready by tomorrow afternoon. Good. Walk with me for a minute. I'd like to discuss personnel matters." They moved away from the other soldiers, finding a quiet spot near the equipment storage building where they could speak privately. "Rodriguez," Marcus began, "I understand you've been working with Private Thompson." Rodriguez's expression became guarded. "Yes, sir. She's an excellent soldier. Very sharp, picks up technical skills quickly. I also understand that you and I have a shared history that you've discussed with Private Thompson." Now Rodriguez looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Sir, I hope I didn't speak out of turn. Private Thompson mentioned that her father was career Army, and when she said your name, he trailed off, clearly uncertain about how much to reveal. Rodriguez, I need you to know that Private Thompson is my daughter. I only discovered her presence here this week." Rodriguez's eyes widened in surprise. "Sir, I had no idea. Private Thompson never indicated that you were stationed here, never asked for special treatment, or mentioned any family connection beyond your service record. Tell me about her adjustment to military life. Your honest assessment." Rodriguez relaxed slightly, moving into the comfortable territory of professional evaluation. "Sir, Private Thompson is one of the best soldiers I've worked with in recent years. She's smart, dedicated, and has natural leadership abilities. The other soldiers respect her because she earns it every day. Any problems? Difficulties with the transition from civilian life?" "None that I've observed, sir. She works hard, follows orders, and helps other soldiers when they're struggling. If I didn't know her background, I would assume she was career military." Rodriguez paused, then added, "Sir, if I may ask, why did she enlist? With her education and family background, she could have commissioned as an officer." Marcus realized that this question went to the heart of what he was trying to understand about Sarah's decisions. "I think she wanted to prove something to herself, and maybe to me." "General," Rodriguez said carefully, "if I may speak freely?" Marcus nodded. "Private Thompson talks about you sometimes. Not in a way that violates security or professional boundaries, but in the way soldiers talk about family. She's proud of your service, proud of what you accomplished in Afghanistan. But I get the sense that she feels like she never really knew you, not the real you." "What do you mean?" "Sir, you saved my life in Kandahar. You put yourself at risk to pull me out of that ambush when you could have waited for support. That tells me something about your character, about what kind of leader you are. But according to Private Thompson, you never talk about that deployment, never share those experiences." Rodriguez looked uncomfortable, but continued. "I think she enlisted because she wanted to understand that part of you. She wanted to know what it means to be a soldier, not just the child of a soldier." The conversation with Rodriguez provided Marcus with new perspective on Sarah's motivations, but it also highlighted the complexity of their situation. Sarah's desire to understand her father through military service was admirable, but it had created a scenario where both father and daughter would need to navigate uncharted territory. That evening, Marcus made a decision that he hoped would begin to address some of these complexities. He composed a brief email to Sarah's company commander, Captain Williams, requesting a meeting to discuss personnel matters. He also sent a message to Sarah herself, asking if she would be available for a conversation that weekend, off base and in civilian clothes. The meeting with Captain Williams took place the following morning. Marcus had decided to follow Henderson's advice about transparency, making the family connection known to Sarah's immediate chain of command, while establishing clear protocols for future interactions. Captain Williams, a competent officer with 8 years of service, listened attentively as Marcus explained the situation. Her initial surprise quickly gave way to professional concern about the implications for unit dynamics and chain of command protocols. "Sir," Captain Williams said, "I want you to know that Private Thompson has been an exemplary soldier. She's integrated well with her unit and has shown natural leadership abilities. I was actually considering recommending her for advanced training opportunities." "I appreciate that assessment, Captain. Moving forward, I want you to treat Private Thompson exactly as you would any other soldier under your command. No special considerations, positive or negative, based on family relationships." "Understood, sir. Should I inform the first sergeant and squad leaders about the connection?" "Yes, but Keep the information within the immediate chain of command. Private Thompson has earned her place here through her own merits, and I don't want that overshadowed by family connections." Captain Williams nodded. "Sir, if I may ask, how do you want to handle any situations where Private Thompson might be involved in disciplinary actions or performance evaluations?" It was a practical question that Marcus had already considered. "I will recuse myself from any formal personnel actions involving Private Thompson. You and the battalion commander will handle those matters through normal channels. And if there are situations where your presence as base commander might create conflicts of interest, we'll address those on a case-by-case basis. But the principle is that military protocol takes precedence over family relationships." Sarah arrived precisely on time, wearing jeans and a Georgetown sweatshirt that reminded Marcus of the college student he remembered. But there was something different about her posture, a confidence and self-possession that spoke to the changes military service had brought about. "Hello, Dad," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Hello, Sarah. Thank you for coming." For a few minutes, they made small talk about the weather, the diner's coffee, and other safe topics while both gathered their courage for more substantial conversation. Finally, Marcus decided to address the situation directly. "Sarah, I've informed your chain of command about our relationship. I wanted them to know so there would be no questions about proper protocols moving forward." Sarah nodded. "I figured you would have to do that eventually." "How did Captain Williams react?" "Professionally. She wanted to ensure that you've been performing well, which apparently you have. I've been trying to prove that I belong here, that I can be a good soldier." Marcus looked at his daughter across the table, seeing both the young woman he remembered and the soldier she had become. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me about your decision to enlist? We could have discussed it, talked through your motivations and concerns." Sarah was quiet for a moment before answering. "Dad, when was the last time we had a real conversation about anything important? Not a 5-minute phone call between your meetings, not a quick catch-up during holiday visits, but an actual conversation about what matters to us." The question stung because Marcus couldn't immediately answer it. Their relationship had become superficial over the years, reduced to periodic check-ins about school performance and career plans. He had convinced himself that this was sufficient, that maintaining contact was more important than the depth of their communication. "You're right," Marcus admitted. "I haven't been available the way I should have been." "It's not just about being available," Sarah continued. "It's about being open, being willing to share who you really are rather than just the general persona you present to the world. Military service teaches you to maintain professional boundaries," Marcus said. "Sometimes those habits carry over into personal relationships in ways that aren't healthy." "Dad, I enlisted because I wanted to understand what drives you, what makes you who you are. I want to know why you chose this life, why you stayed even when it cost you your marriage and your relationship with me." Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. "Rodriguez told me about Afghanistan, about what you did to save him. He told me about the soldier you were, the leader who put himself at risk for his men. That's not the father I grew up knowing. I knew the general who missed school events because of work obligations, but I never knew the man who would run across a battlefield under fire to save a wounded soldier." Marcus felt the weight of years of missed opportunities for connection. He had compartmentalized his life so completely that he had failed to share the experiences and values that defined him with the person who should have known him best. "Sarah, military service involves experiences that are difficult to explain to people who haven't lived them. I thought I was protecting you from those realities. By protecting me from them, you protected me from understanding you," Sarah replied. "I needed to experience military service myself to realize what I had been missing." The conversation continued for over 2 hours, covering years of misunderstanding and misconnections. Sarah described her decision-making process, from her growing dissatisfaction with academic life to her realization that she wanted to test herself against the same challenges that had shaped her father. Marcus shared his own reflections on military service, acknowledging that he had used professional obligations as a way to avoid the vulnerability that close relationships required. By the time they prepared to leave the diner, both father and daughter had reached a new understanding. The situation at Fort Braxton would remain complex, requiring careful navigation of both professional and personal boundaries. But for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was seeing his daughter clearly and, perhaps more importantly, allowing her to see him as well. The tattoo that had stopped Marcus cold in the mess hall had been Sarah's way of claiming connection to the part of his life that had remained hidden. Now, through honest conversation and mutual respect, they were beginning to build a relationship based on understanding rather than assumption. The path forward would not be easy, but it would be authentic in ways that their previous relationship had never been. The weeks following the diner conversation marked a delicate period of adjustment for both Marcus and Sarah. They had established new understanding between them personally, but the professional challenges of serving together at Fort Braxton required constant attention to boundaries and protocol. Marcus found himself hyper-aware of every interaction with the 442nd Support Battalion, careful to ensure that his presence never created the appearance of favoritism or special interest in Sarah's unit. The first real test of their new dynamic came during a base-wide training exercise designed to simulate convoy operations in hostile territory. The exercise involved multiple units working together to transport supplies across challenging terrain while responding to simulated enemy attacks. Sarah's unit was assigned to provide mechanical support for the convoy vehicles, a critical role that would test both technical skills and decision-making under pressure. Marcus would normally observe such exercises from a command post, monitoring radio communications and receiving periodic updates from unit commanders. However, this particular exercise had attracted attention from Pentagon officials who were evaluating new training protocols, making Marcus's direct presence in the field necessary to brief visiting dignitaries and answer questions about Fort Braxton's training capabilities. The exercise began at dawn with a convoy of 20 vehicles departing the base in a carefully orchestrated formation. Sarah's team was positioned at the midpoint of the convoy, ready to respond to mechanical failures or combat damage to critical vehicles. Marcus established his observation post on a ridgeline that provided visual oversight of the entire training area, accompanied by the visiting Pentagon officials and his staff. For the first 3 hours, the exercise proceeded according to plan. The convoy navigated rough terrain successfully, responding appropriately to simulated ambushes and coordinating effectively between different units. Marcus found himself watching Sarah's vehicle more closely than the others, though he was careful not to let his personal interest become obvious to the officials around him. The situation changed dramatically when an unexpected mechanical failure occurred with one of the convoy's primary cargo vehicles. The truck carrying critical communications equipment suffered a transmission failure that left it immobilized in the middle of the training area. According to exercise protocol, the convoy had to either repair the vehicle quickly or transfer its cargo to other trucks while maintaining defensive positions against continuing simulated attacks. Sarah's team was called forward to assess the situation and attempt repairs. Marcus watched through binoculars as his daughter and 3 other soldiers worked frantically under the disabled vehicle, while other convoy members provided security. The Pentagon officials were impressed by the speed and coordination of the response, unaware that Marcus was watching his own daughter crawl through dirt and grease to diagnose transmission problems under simulated combat conditions. The repair attempt revealed that the transmission damage was too extensive for field repairs, necessitating the transfer of critical equipment to other vehicles. This was a complex operation that required careful coordination between multiple units, and time was running short as the exercise scenario called for the convoy to reach its destination within specific time constraints. It was during this equipment transfer that the exercise took an unexpected turn. One of the Pentagon officials, impressed by the professionalism he was observing, asked Marcus to identify some of the soldiers who were performing particularly well. The official was specifically interested in the soldier who appeared to be leading the equipment transfer operation. Marcus realized that the official was asking about Sarah. Through binoculars, it was clear that she had taken charge of the transfer operation, directing other soldiers in the proper handling of sensitive communications equipment while maintaining awareness of the tactical situation around them. Her performance was exemplary by any measure, but acknowledging it to the Pentagon official would inevitably lead to questions about her background and qualifications. "That's Private Thompson," Marcus said carefully. "She's been with the 442nd Support Battalion for about 2 months and has shown excellent technical aptitude." The official made notes, clearly impressed by what he was observing. "Exceptional leadership for such a junior soldier. Has she been considered for advanced training or promotion opportunities?" Marcus found himself in precisely the kind of situation that he and Henderson had discussed. Any comment he made about Sarah's potential would be scrutinized later, potentially creating questions about whether his assessment was influenced by personal relationships. At the same time, failing to acknowledge exceptional performance would be unfair to Sarah and dishonest to the Pentagon official. "Private Thompson has performed well across multiple assignments," Marcus said. "Personnel recommendations would come through her chain of command rather than from my direct observation." The official nodded, apparently satisfied with this response, but Marcus knew that Sarah's performance during this exercise would likely generate follow-up questions and attention that could complicate their carefully managed situation. The convoy exercise concluded successfully, with all units reaching their objectives within the prescribed time limits. Sarah's team received commendations for their handling of the mechanical failure and their professionalism during a complex operation. When Marcus received the after-action reports that evening, Sarah's name appeared prominently in multiple sections, highlighted by several different unit commanders for her technical expertise and leadership abilities. The success of the exercise created new challenges for Marcus. Sarah's exceptional performance had attracted attention that went beyond the normal recognition given to competent soldiers. Captain Williams requested a meeting to discuss accelerated training opportunities for Sarah, and the battalion commander mentioned her as a candidate for promotion consideration well ahead of the normal timeline. Marcus realized that Sarah's competence was creating exactly the kind of visibility that could lead to questions about family connections and potential favoritism. The situation required careful handling to ensure that Sarah's achievements were recognized appropriately without creating the impression that her family relationship had influenced her opportunities. The meeting with Captain Williams took place in Marcus's office the following Tuesday. Williams brought Sarah's complete personnel file, including performance evaluations from her short time at Fort Braxton and training records that demonstrated consistently high achievement across multiple skill areas. "General," Williams began, "Private Thompson has shown exceptional potential during her time here. Her technical skills are outstanding, but, more importantly, she demonstrates natural leadership abilities that suggest she could be effective at higher levels of responsibility." Marcus reviewed the documentation Williams had provided. Sarah's scores on technical training assessments were in the top 5% of soldiers at her experience level. Her performance evaluations contained language typically reserved for much more experienced personnel. Multiple supervisors had noted her ability to mentor newer soldiers while continuing to learn and improve her own capabilities. "What specific opportunities are you considering?" Marcus asked. "Several possibilities, sir. There's an advanced mechanic school that would enhance her technical qualifications. There's also a leadership development program designed for junior soldiers who show early command potential. Either option would be career-enhancing and would recognize her demonstrated abilities." Williams paused, then added, "Sir, I want you to know that these recommendations are based solely on Private Thompson's performance. I'm not suggesting special treatment because of family relationships." Marcus appreciated Williams's directness in addressing the obvious concern. "Captain, I want Private Thompson to receive the same consideration as any soldier with similar performance records. No more, no less." "Understood, sir. In that case, I believe she's clearly qualified for both opportunities one mentioned." Marcus faced a difficult decision. Sarah deserved recognition for her performance, and denying her appropriate opportunities because of their family relationship would be unfair to her and dishonest about his command responsibilities. At the same time, approving recommendations that would give Sarah additional visibility and career advancement could create the appearance of favoritism. Captain Williams, I want you to run these recommendations through the battalion commander for review and approval. If he concurs with your assessment, then proceed through normal channels. I'll recuse myself from any final approval decisions. This approach would ensure that Sarah's opportunities were evaluated by multiple officers without direct input from Marcus, providing the kind of transparency that the situation required. After Williams left his office, Marcus found himself reflecting on the complexity of Sarah's position at Fort Braxton. Her competence was undeniable, but every recognition she received would be scrutinized for evidence of special treatment. Other soldiers might question whether her opportunities were based on merit or family connections. Sarah herself would have to live with uncertainty about whether her achievements were viewed as legitimate by her peers and superiors. That evening, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from Rodriguez. The staff sergeant rarely contacted him directly, making the call immediately concerning. "Sir," Rodriguez said, "I wanted to inform you about a situation involving Private Thompson that you should be aware of." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of situation?" "Nothing serious, sir, but something that might require your attention. There's been some talk among the soldiers about Private Thompson's background. Some rumors about family connections to base command." This was exactly what Marcus had been hoping to avoid. "What kind of talk?" "Nothing malicious, sir, but soldiers are curious about how a private with 2 months of service is being considered for advanced training opportunities. Some of them are wondering if there are factors beyond performance involved in the recommendations." Rodriguez continued, "Sir, I want you to know that Private Thompson has handled this professionally. When soldiers have asked her directly about rumors, she's neither confirmed nor denied them. She's told them that she's here to be a good soldier and that her performance should speak for itself." Marcus appreciated Rodriguez's heads up about the developing situation. Military bases were small communities where rumors spread quickly, and any unusual circumstances involving personnel decisions inevitably generated speculation. "Rodriguez, what's your assessment of the situation? Is this likely to affect unit morale or Private Thompson's effectiveness?" "Sir, honestly, most of the soldiers respect Private Thompson's work ethic and capabilities. The rumors are more curiosity than criticism. But if the situation isn't addressed somehow, it could become more problematic over time." Marcus thanked Rodriguez for the information and ended the call, realizing that the situation with Sarah was reaching a point where more direct action might be necessary. The rumors about family connections were likely to persist and grow unless addressed transparently. The following morning, Marcus made a decision that he hoped would resolve the speculation while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. He requested a meeting with the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Johnson, to discuss the situation comprehensively and develop a strategy for managing it effectively. Johnson was a career officer with 22 years of service, known for his practical approach to leadership challenges and his ability to maintain unit cohesion under difficult circumstances. Marcus trusted his judgment and knew that he would provide honest feedback about the best way to handle the situation with Sarah. "Colonel Johnson," Marcus began, "I need to discuss a personnel matter that affects unit dynamics and requires careful handling." Marcus explained the entire situation, from discovering Sarah's presence at Fort Braxton to the recent rumors about family connections and special treatment. Johnson listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly absorbing the complexity of the circumstances. "General," Johnson said when Marcus finished, "I've been wondering about Private Thompson myself. Her performance has been exceptional, but the timeline for her advancement recommendations seemed unusually fast. Your honest assessment. Do you believe the recommendations are justified based on merit?" Johnson nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely. Private Thompson has earned every recognition she's received. The question isn't whether she deserves opportunities, but how to ensure that her family connection doesn't undermine her credibility with other soldiers." "Recommendations?" "Sir, I think you need to address this directly with the unit. Not make a big announcement, but acknowledge the relationship in a way that establishes clear expectations about performance standards and equal treatment. Johnson continued, the rumor mill will keep churning until there's official information. By providing that information yourself, you control the narrative and demonstrate transparency. Marcus considered Johnson's recommendation. It would require revealing the family connection more broadly than he had originally intended, but it would also eliminate speculation and establish clear ground rules for Sarah's continued service at Fort Braxton. How would you suggest handling this? I recommend a brief address to the 442nd Support Battalion during their next unit formation. Acknowledge that you have a family member serving in the unit, establish expectations about equal treatment, and emphasize that all personnel decisions will be based on merit and performance. It was a sound approach that would address the rumors directly while establishing clear expectations for the future. Marcus agreed to Johnson's recommendation and asked him to coordinate with Captain Williams to schedule the address for the following week. The unit formation took place on a Wednesday morning in the battalion assembly area. Approximately 200 soldiers stood in formation as Marcus approached the podium that had been set up for his remarks. He had carefully prepared his comments to address the situation without making it more significant than necessary. Good morning, soldiers, Marcus began. I want to address some questions that have been circulating about personnel policies and family relationships within the command structure. The formation was completely silent, with every soldier focused on Marcus's words. I have a family member serving with the 442nd Support Battalion. This soldier enlisted through normal procedures, has trained according to standard protocols, and will be evaluated using the same performance criteria applied to all personnel under my command. Marcus paused to let this information sink in before continuing. Any advancement opportunities, training assignments, or recognition this soldier receives will be based solely on merit and performance. No special considerations will be given based on family relationships, and no soldier will be denied opportunities because of family connections to command personnel. I expect all soldiers to be evaluated fairly based on their individual contributions and capabilities. Questions about personnel policies or advancement opportunities should be directed through your chain of command using established procedures. Marcus concluded his remarks and dismissed the formation, but he remained in the area to observe soldiers' reactions and answer any questions that might arise. The response seemed positive, with soldiers appearing satisfied that the situation had been addressed directly rather than allowed to fester through continued speculation. Later that day, Captain Williams reported that the unit's reaction had been generally favorable. Soldiers appreciated the transparency and the clear establishment of expectations about equal treatment. Most importantly, the rumors that had been circulating seemed to have been effectively addressed by Marcus's direct acknowledgement of the situation. Sarah herself approached Marcus after the formation, requesting a brief conversation about the implications of his announcement. "Dad," she said when they were alone, "I appreciate you addressing the rumors, but I'm concerned about the additional scrutiny this might create." Marcus understood her concern. "Sarah, the rumors were growing regardless. By addressing them directly, we've established clear ground rules that protect both of us. I just want to be evaluated based on my performance, not on my family connections. That's exactly what will happen. But we can't pretend that the family connection doesn't exist and try to hide it was creating more problems than acknowledging it." Sarah nodded, apparently accepting the logic of Marcus's decision. "I guess I just need to work twice as hard to prove that I belong here." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You need to work exactly as hard as every other soldier. That's the point. Equal standards, equal treatment, equal opportunities." Over the following weeks, the situation at Fort Braxton settled into a new equilibrium. Sarah continued to perform exceptionally well, earning recognition for her technical skills and leadership abilities. The advanced training opportunities that Captain Williams had recommended were approved through normal channels, with Sarah ultimately being selected for both the Advanced Mechanic School and the Leadership Development Program. Most importantly, The transparency about their family relationship had eliminated the speculation and rumors that had been developing. Other soldiers accepted Sarah based on her demonstrated competence, and her achievements were viewed as legitimate rather than the result of special treatment. Marcus found that his own relationship with Sarah had evolved as well. They maintained strict professional boundaries on base, but their weekend conversations had become more frequent and more substantive. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was truly getting to know his daughter as an adult, understanding her motivations, and respecting her choices even when they differed from his expectations. The tattoo that had originally stopped Marcus cold in the mess hall had become a symbol of connection rather than division. Sarah had used it to claim understanding of her father's military experience, but the real understanding had come through honest conversation and shared respect for military service. Both father and daughter had learned that relationships required transparency and vulnerability, qualities that military training often discouraged but family relationships demanded. 6 months after that first encounter in the mess hall, Marcus received orders for a new assignment to the Pentagon. The notification meant that his time at Fort Braxton would end within 3 months, creating new decisions about Sarah's military career and their evolving relationship. During their next weekend conversation, Marcus shared the news about his reassignment and asked Sarah about her own plans for the future. "I've been accepted for the Advanced Mechanic School," Sarah said. "It's a 6-month program that would give me specialized training in heavy equipment repair. After that, I'm hoping to apply for Warrant Officer Candidate School." Marcus was surprised by the ambition of Sarah's career plans. Warrant officers were technical specialists who commanded respect throughout the military for their expertise and experience. It was a challenging career path that required years of dedicated service and continuous learning. "That's an excellent goal," Marcus said. "What attracted you to that particular career track?" "I like the combination of technical expertise and leadership responsibility. Warrant officers are the people who solve problems that nobody else can solve. They're respected because they know their jobs better than anyone else." Sarah paused, then added, "I also like the idea of earning respect through competence rather than rank or family connections. Warrant officers get where they are because they're the best at what they do." Marcus realized that Sarah had found her path through military service, discovering not just what she was capable of, but what she wanted to become. Her decision to enlist had been motivated by a desire to understand him, but it had evolved into something much more personal, her own journey of self-discovery and professional development. "Sarah, I want you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished here. You've proven yourself as a soldier and earned the respect of everyone you've worked with." "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot coming from you." They sat quietly for a moment, both reflecting on how much had changed since that morning in the mess hall when a simple tattoo had forced a confrontation between father and daughter. "Dad," Sarah finally said, "I want you to know that enlisting was the right decision for me. I needed to understand military service for myself, not just as your daughter, but as my own person." Marcus nodded. "I understand that now. I also understand that I failed to share important parts of myself with you over the years. Military service taught me discipline and leadership, but it also taught me to compartmentalize emotions in ways that weren't healthy for family relationships." "We're both learning," Sarah replied. "The important thing is that we're finally being honest with each other." As Marcus prepared to leave Fort Braxton for his Pentagon assignment, he reflected on the lessons learned during his time commanding the base. The encounter with Sarah had forced him to confront the ways that professional obligations could become barriers to personal relationships. It had also demonstrated that sometimes the most challenging leadership situations were the ones that couldn't be resolved through military protocol alone. The tattoo that had stopped him cold in the mess hall had been Sarah's way of claiming connection to his military experience, but the real connection had been built through honest conversation and mutual respect. Both father and daughter had learned that understanding required vulnerability and that the strongest relationships were built on truth rather than assumption. Marcus's final weeks at Fort Braxton were spent ensuring smooth transition of command responsibilities and completing personnel evaluations for soldiers under his command. Sarah's evaluation was handled entirely by her chain of command, as Marcus had established from the beginning, but he took quiet pride in reading the official assessment that described her as an exceptional soldier with unlimited potential for advancement. The day before Marcus departed for his new assignment, he and Sarah had one final conversation off base. This time, they met at a park where they could talk privately without any concerns about military protocol or professional boundaries. "Sarah," Marcus began, "I want you to know that watching you develop as a soldier has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. You've proven that you can excel at anything you set your mind to. Dad, joining the Army taught me things about myself that I never would have discovered in civilian life. It also taught me things about you that I never understood before." Sarah rolled up her sleeve, exposing the tattoo that had started their journey of understanding. "Rodriguez was right when he said this would connect me to your history. But the real connection came from talking honestly about what military service means to both of us." Marcus looked at the tattoo that had once represented a gulf between them, but now symbolized their shared commitment to service and their growing understanding of each other. "Sarah, I want you to know that you have my support for whatever career path you choose. Whether you stay in the military for 4 years or 30 years, I'll be proud of your service." "Thank you, Dad. That means everything to me." As they parted that afternoon, both Marcus and Sarah understood that their relationship had been fundamentally transformed by the events at Fort Braxton. They had moved from distant politeness to genuine connection, from assumptions about each other's motivations to understanding based on honest communication. The tattoo in the mess hall had stopped General Marcus Thompson cold because it represented his daughter's attempt to claim understanding of his military experience. But the real understanding had come through the difficult conversations and careful boundary setting that followed. Both father and daughter had learned that relationships require continuous effort and that the most important connections are built through truth, respect, and shared commitment to something larger than individual ambition. Years later, when Sarah had earned her warrant officer commission and Marcus had completed his Pentagon assignment, they would look back on their time at Fort Braxton as the period when they finally learned to see each other clearly. The tattoo remained a symbol of Sarah's military service and her connection to her father's history, but it was no longer a barrier between them. Instead, it had become a reminder of the journey they had taken together to build a relationship based on understanding, respect, and love.